Today I saw an interesting video from the YouTuber The Captain's Stuffin' Things. The Captain, or I hope that's what he wants to be called, has a few questions for AnCaps. Now, I consider myself pretty darn close to being an anarcho-capitalist, so I'd figured I'd jump on this bandwagon and answer these questions, and hopefully we can get some views out of this. I need some views. I also thought that this was a pretty good video. The Captain Stuffin' Things has a pretty good YouTube channel here. The questions happen to be some of the hardest questions AnCaps could ever try to answer because of the nature of the questions themselves, which we will get to. But overall, I'd like to thank the Captain for being respectful, and I will reciprocate in kind with maybe a little jab here and there. So without further ado, let's do this.
Now, me personally, I am a minimalistic government kind of guy, okay? I think that you need at least a little governing to keep a healthy society running. But I'm always open to ideas and conversations. Keep in mind, too, that I also think that AnCaps are the most sensible and reasonable out of all the anarchists out there. A lot of the other ones are just batshit insane. I mean, anarcho-communist, holy shit.
I know, right? Like, what the fuck?
Anyway, I find I can agree with a lot of what they advocate for. But again, a lot of arguments for and against seem to have a lot of conjecture. For instance, I don't know what would happen if it was implemented across the entire country. I can't say for sure. I mean, if we're going by how it looks on paper, sure, but if we're going by how things look on paper, then communism is a good idea.
Okay, so first of all, communism does not look good on paper. As we all know, resources are limited, and everyone's time preference is different. Communists can't account for things like economizing scarce resources, aggregating time preferences of populations, or even knowing when a plan has failed until it's too late. And all of this can be realized just by reading what they write. The other thing we need to take into account here is AnCaptinStan does not get implemented, as this would imply central planning, which can only come from a form of governance with monopolistic privileges in the production of property protections, i.e. the state. So, no, Captain, no. And this brings us to our next problem. Big nukes!
Nuclear weapons. By far the most powerful and game-changing tool humanity has been able to conjure up thus far. And in my opinion, this seems to be the largest monkey wrench in the idea of having an AnCap country, and I believe rightfully so. Before I get too far into it, I know this may be an American-centric view on this question, but I live here in the good old US of A, so if you wouldn't mind humoring me, let's continue with the assumption that the USA is where AnCaptinStan has decided to raise its flag. So let's say that your dreams have come true and the American government has suddenly wished out of existence. Poof, no more America. What do we do about nuclear weapons? Firstly, how would you divide up our current nuclear arsenal? Do any groups claiming to be capitalist military have claim? Do they divide them up? Do they go to the highest bidder? And in that case, who gets the money?
The entirety of this video is the Captain putting AnCaptinStan in the most impossible and dire situations imaginable. And I really do mean impossible. You have to understand that the question you just asked has absolutely nothing to do with anarcho-capitalist theory at all. What kind of situation are we talking about here? Was AnCaptinStan America yesterday with its government and everything, and then now today it's AnCaptinStan? So like the rest of the world saw the United States go from being what it is to AnCaptinStan like overnight. I mean, you're looking at a possible world-ending event. I'm sorry to laugh, but I just don't think you understand the absolute impossible situation you just put AnCaptinStan into, and you're not going to get very good responses to this because it's just so absurd. What if I asked you, how does your minarchist society deal with everyone in your society growing extra appendages at the rate of like 12 appendages per second? Bam. Checkmate, statist. But you've asked me to humor you, and I'm going to do my best here. So, what would AnCaptinStan do? Well, I'm sorry to say it, but AnCaptinStan wouldn't have nukes. If it were just magic somehow and the United States was AnCaptinStan with all of the ANCAP institutions and everything in place, the nukes would be gone. They wouldn't even be here. And the reason why is because there's just no money in nukes. It's not needed for defense, and you can't sell nukes. You start to build nuclear weapons, and it's not like people aren't going to find out. There's going to be satellites and all kinds of other nations prying and looking in and seeing what's going on. They're going to know if we're making nukes. Something like that would start a war, and the cost of that war would vastly outweigh the benefits from, a McNuke factory. So I'm sorry, it's probably not the answer that you wanted, but you gotta ask the right questions, man.
What happens when the people you are paying to protect you get a better deal in a lengthy contract to subvert any repercussions to their reputation with the general population? I think you see where I'm going with this, and I think it's a very serious issue. You have to worry about countries outside of AnCaptinStan who want all of those nice resources and that land that you're sitting on. You see, the free market is supposed to balance itself out with incentive. A company does something sketchy, and the public stops funding them due to their declining reputation. But with money flowing in from an outside source, that kind of subverts the balance of the free market.
Okay, so this question is a little more reasonable. However, it's still based on a few assumptions, and so let me explain how this would work. In AnCaptinStan, they would most likely use a polycentric legal system in which there isn't law enforcement, but property protection. Unlike a status society that uses a state for the protection of property, AnCaptinStan doesn't have a monopoly on this service that has a one-size-fits-all type of institution. Because, as it turns out, in regards to property protection, different people have different needs. You have some people with more property than others that needs to be protected. You have some people with properties that span out across large sections. You have people with multiple properties and multiple different areas in the country. And you have people in completely different socioeconomic situations. You would most likely see a scenario where you and your neighbor have different property protection agencies. The coverage of protection would look kind of like the cell phone coverage maps that you see from, Verizon or AT&T and such. So what if a large country like Russia decided they wanted to pay one of these companies to subvert AnCaptinStan interests? Well, like you brought up, customers would drop their coverage and pick up coverage from one of their competitors, which would pick up defensive positions to fight the usurper. But ultimately, this comes down to economics. I mean, you kind of made it easy for me here, picking America and all. It already does have the largest economy in the world, and no doubt it would be much larger if it were AnCaptinStan. This rogue company would find itself surrounded by other property protection companies, which would cut off supply lines and take that company out. I mean, they would have vastly superior resources, and they would vastly outnumber the rogue company. I think that the presumption here is that AnCaptinStan would have very large property enforcement companies, and that, maybe China or Russia or somebody would pay them to attack AnCaptinStan, and like, I don't know, like a quarter of the country would be under attack, but you're making a presumption that there really is no evidence for. We would most likely see a very decentralized type of system. And that's one thing that gives AnCaptinStan such great stability, is there is no central focal point of attack. It's very decentralized, which would make this plan nigh impossible to accomplish. Now, I'm not saying AnCaptinStan would be impervious, but I think that this would not be a very good strategy. I just don't see anybody trying to employ this strategy to attack AnCaptinStan.
So, while we're on the subject of other hostile countries interacting with AnCaptinStan, you have to realize that a bunch of military companies are going to be a lot less effective in battle against a single unified nation's army. Let's say that all of those mercenaries have hearts of gold and truly do embody anarcho-capitalism, unwavering in their convictions to AnCaptinStan.
Fucking dude, your character is awesome.
You still have a bunch of broken up military powers. For the free market to work, you can't have a singularly powerful military in AnCaptinStan. Otherwise, you have a military superpower, and the dangers of that power becoming corrupt and enforcing its own rule is very real. So like I said, you have a bunch of separate military powers against a single, unified national army. Any strategist worth his salt will tell you that you're at a severe disadvantage here. Even if all the companies are cooperating, they're not going to be as effective as the invading forces. Again, though, I suppose you could make the argument that you could appeal to the generosity of other nations to intervene, which is a fair point. If you assume that the international community will aid you against an invading country, you would stand a far better chance. But let's play devil's advocate. Just for argument's sake, let's say that no country wants to get mixed up in the affair. Nobody just wants to get involved in this war. So where does that leave AnCaptinStan?
So we can't have help from anybody else? Oh, it's more possible. Shit just wouldn't happen. Oh, okay. Let's say that you're France, and the United States attacks you, and nobody comes to your aid. Well, looks like you're fucked, France. Checkmate, statist. The question is, why wouldn't they help? The country of AnCaptinStan would be the new Swiss bank account. It would be the new Panama. It would be where Queen Elizabeth, Maduro, and Vladimir Putin did their banking. You don't attack Switzerland for a reason. I think a better question would be, what does AnCaptinStan do for national defense? How does it get around the public good problem? And well, my answer for that would be insurance companies. So let's play this out. You've got large businesses in AnCaptinStan, and these businesses are going to want to take out insurance policies to mitigate the risk of attack from foreign nations. And because stopping an attack that would destroy very large and expensive buildings would be cheaper than actually rebuilding them, insurance companies would offer these types of plans. They would also partner with companies that specialize in keeping shipping lanes free of pirates and other belligerents. They would partner with air travel security. There would necessarily be military equipment in AnCaptinStan. However, it wouldn't be like in America. There wouldn't be as much. That is for sure, because defense is much cheaper than offense. There's another presumption here. Just because property protection agencies are decentralized, that doesn't therefore mean that they can't communicate and organize. You see, the question, what happens if we're attacked, will come up. There will be a demand, and companies will fill that demand. Now, all these things combined with the fact that everyone in AnCaptinStan would be armed, everyone who wishes to be, which in America would be almost everyone, you can see that this is a hell of a deterrent from anybody wanting to attack AnCaptinStan. The question then turns to, well, would this deterrent be sufficient? And in all fairness, I don't know. I find it kind of odd that you put AnCaptinStan in America, which has a history of taking down world superpowers with ragtag armies. Not to mention, the United States is now AnCaptinStan, so the largest military force in the world is now gone. So now you would be dealing with, Russia? I think California has a bigger GDP than Russia. And I'm sorry, I just don't feel very threatened by that.
So my other big question, something that I am incredibly curious about. How do you plan on making AnCaptinStan become a reality? For instance, let's say that your name is
Snizzypoo?
and you advocate heavily for anarcho-capitalism. It's something that you really believe in. How does
Snizzypoo
plan on setting in motion the machinations which will lead to the birth of glorious AnCaptinStan? I mean, the whole purpose of advocating for something is to one day see it implemented, right? So how do you topple the government and replace it with the free market, all without violating the non-aggression principle? Do you do it by trying to get more AnCaps in position of power? You know, slowly chopping away at the tree of government, removing one piece of legislation at a time? Or do you take a chainsaw and just follow the whole damn thing at once? And more importantly, how do you prevent the whole country from, not becoming a bad playthrough of Fallout minus the radiation? I am extremely curious about your plans and strategies for implementing your ideas. What path do you plan on taking to making your dreams and ideas happen?
I'm an NAP guy. Not all AnCaps believe that the NAP is as useful as others. There are anarcho-capitalists who believe that on consequence, anarcho-capitalism would be superior to the status systems, and they don't really care about the deontological arguments that the more of the natural rights, Rothbardian-style AnCaps argue for. However, my personal favorite plan that's been proposed by Hans Hoppe is a bottom-up type of strategy that starts with decentralization. And you'll have to note that there are institutions working on this right now. Take a look at the 10th Amendment Center. Take a look at the Mises Institute. We've been pushing things for like states' rights and nullification. Right now you have part of California wanting to secede from the other part. That is to say that these ideas we've been pushing for a very long time have had an effect on the public consciousness and are spreading around the country. In my last video, I explained how the federal government can't possibly enforce all of its laws. It needs the states to acquiesce and spend their own funds in helping enforce the federal laws in the books. And states can say no. They can just say, we're not going to do this. And in fact, cities within the states can do that as well. So the idea is to get involved in local government. We could pass laws that prevent tax recipients from voting, such as welfare recipients, judges, police officers. The argument goes, well, these people receive all of their funding from taxpayers. Therefore, they don't have a right to vote on the amount of tax monies that they receive. States can pass laws that are in opposition to federal law, which would put the odious of enforcement on the federal government itself. Following these strategies to their logical conclusion, and given enough time, you will see the United States become de facto anarcho-capitalism. Now, this wouldn't be the dream world utopia anarcho-capitalism that some people subscribe to. However, this would entail the destruction of the monopoly that the federal government has on the use of force within its geographical area. Now, it's one thing for some nut jobs in Waco to defy the federal government and be put down, and quite another thing for whole communities of respectable people to defy federal law. This would place the federal government in quite a pickle, where it would have to use force to legitimize its monopoly of force, which to many Americans would make the federal government illegitimate. Now, I'm not sure how far this strategy can take us, but I do know that we have made inroads. There is progress being made. The way I describe it is, I've got an ANCAP train. It's going to take us all the way to anarcho-capitalism. And along the way, if you want to get off, that's fine. But as long as we're moving in that direction, that's a good thing. So I'd like to thank you again for making this video. I hope my responses were good enough answers for you. For the few viewers that I actually have, please check out the Captain's channel. Link will be in the description box. I'm Snizzypoo. If you like this material, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. McNews!